You ever sleeve up a deck, shuffle it, and feel like a god until your hand comes up triple reds, no block, and no prayers in the world? Yeah, that's not just bad luck. That's cardiac arrest in deck form. In this episode, we take a scalpel to Flesh and Blood's deck design, uncovering the weak spots that cost players before they even sit down to play. From awkward pitch curves to inconsistent game plans, we'll walk you through what we look for when evaluating a deck for flaws and how to strengthen your list before it gets punished at the table. Your deck might look good sleeved up, but what happens when the pressure's on and your two-card hand doesn't do what it needs to do? This week, our focus on our Learning Journey podcast is where we're all doctors in card Iology, where
Oof.
we diagnose weak cards
Oh,
in deck design. I'm Will,
I'm Ning.
And Trevor.
and we have a special moment where, for the sake of brevity, we will skip what we learned last week to talk about heartthrobs and for us to be still our beating hearts with our newest cast member, another killer in our local scene, a consistent day tour, a champion of champions, and might I say, a buttery voice. Would you like to introduce yourself, Evan?
Hey everyone, it's me, Evan.
Let's go.
Yeah, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mhm.
And so we roped in Evan, but Evan, how long have you been playing the game?
Yeah, man, I have been playing for a very long time. I have been playing since 2021, so coming on 4 years now. I started playing right before Tales of Aria released, and that's why I'm the person with the most knowledge on that set. I guess you did allude to it, but I do have some pretty nice accolades. I did top 8 Battle Hard in Atlanta this year with a pretty spicy list, I might add. I was very, very happy with my list. And I have top 32 to a couple of callings as well. So
Very cool. And what got you into Fab? We always like to do this since we are a Learning Journey podcast, and we covered it in our episode 1, which we'll have to re-record one day, guys. But Evan, what got you into Fab?
I was a Magic the Gathering player, and I was kind of not very happy with a couple decisions that they've made here and there. So I think I was watching the Tellurian Community College a couple years back, which is a big Magic show, and he was introducing. He made a learn to play for Flesh and Blood, and I said, "Hey, what's that? That looks really cool." Importantly, which might come up sooner or later, given you guys' podcast, the big thing was I love draft and I love sealed. And he mentioned that there's a sealed and draft format in Flesh and Blood, and instantly I said, I'm there. I'm no matter what.
Hmm. So, and you're talking about the professor, right?
Yeah, the professor from Tellurian Community College.
I don't even play Magic anymore. I've been out that scene for so long, but even I know about this guy. So, well, we welcome you to the community, and I know facing you and your spicy deck tech is always a learning experience for me. So,
There's
glad to have you on.
nothing. I
Hey,
do spicy stuff on occasion, but
my-
yeah, I was about to say Ning. Like,
my one accolade, if anything, is beating Evan the one time I played with
oh
him
my god,
at Zen. And it wasn't even like a typical Zen deck, if we want to talk about
that was
spice.
really, really funny. Yeah,
So, what happened? And then we'll continue on with the podcast. Like, tell us this funny story.
Well, let me set the scene. All right. So here Evan is on Ira. I'm at I think 1 HP basically. And
you are
he was-
Kodachi locked.
Yeah, I was Kadachi locked, and I had blocked mostly everything. Evan had 4 life left. I threw a Crouching Tiger at him for 0, and he said, "No blocks." And I
Well,
threw him
importantly, you had one card in hand.
I did have one card in hand.
And I joked, I said to myself, what kills me? And I was like, just a Nick? And I said, no blocks.
He said no blocks, so I played Ancestral Empowerment. So that's a +1 and draw a card. And then he said no reactions. So then I top decked a Maul, which gave the Crouching Tiger a +3 on top of the +1, which he died to. So it was a great time.
You know, hey, was even David brought down Goliath, so even a little guy could bring down a giant, right? I
Right.
love it, Ding.
Mhm.
That's right. I'll never let him live that down.
All right. Well, doctors, right? We're here to talk about deck design, right? And how we can take our weak decks and look at them, evaluate them, and make them better. Figure this is a topic of like with the PQ season coming up, and a lot of people just typically net decking, but not understanding what they're playing and why they're playing it. Figured this is a great topic, and I always wanted to say, Doctor. That's usually when one of you guys say Doctor back, but anyways, okay. So
Okay.
Eric, we
I'm
need
already
I'm
to
new here.
already off to a great start. Yeah, don't worry, my jokes usually fall flat, anyways. So first thing first, we're talking about deck design. Let's go ahead and define our weakness in our deck designs, right? Let's go ahead and define what that weakness is. What would you guys define it as?
I think a weakness could be a few things, right? It could be like you could have a weakness into like a certain class, or it could be an archetype, like your deck easily gets fatigued, or you can be prone to not blocking very well, so damage can get over you pretty easily. And you just kind of have to identify which one of those you want to attack when you're deck building, right? To put in those cards to like counter those strategies that are trying to beat you out.
Okay. And Ning, how about you? What would you define
well,
a deck
I,
weakness as?
well, I feel like Trevor explained that pretty well, but I think the other important part is to make a distinction of what kind of weakness you have. And what I mean by that is this a self-imposed weakness, or is this a weakness of inherently of the character? Right. So the question is, are you building a deck and that revolves around a character, and then are you building, to its strengths, or are you just building, let's say, a generic ninja deck and then applying it to any hero and hoping that it works?
And how about our newest cast member, Evan? What do you think a weakness is when it comes to deck design?
Yeah, the two of them definitely hit it out of the park with this. Honestly, like I think of it more of like it's kind of like two sides of the same coin, right? Because with weakness there also comes strength, right? And when designing a deck, it's important to identify like, hey, what does my deck want to do? It's powerful. What exactly, like, when exactly does this work, right? And on the flip side, what can my opponent do to make like my strategy fall apart essentially, right? And then once you've identified, hey, like these are the cards that will force me to play on the back foot, will force me to make inoptimal plays, then you can start identifying how to fix that.
Okay. And I went more generic, right? And I want to see what you guys said, but I said it's really three things. It's inconsistency, inefficiency, and really vulnerability, which I think you guys covered in more specific details, right? So to Ning's point, how do you decide if it's a natural weakness versus an inherent design flaw or a mistake in deck design?
I mean, some decks have like very blatant inherent weaknesses, like all the shadow heroes have blood debt,
Mm,
like that's a downside, right? Like, and that's something that you need to offset by doing damage or keeping your blood debt low. Like Vincent usually doesn't keep a ton in there, but Levia builds up a ton, and then you're building your deck that you're going to banish a card with 6 or more power every turn, right? Because you don't want the blood debt to kill you. So when you're designing your deck, you got to keep that in mind as one example for inherent.
mm. And I think like with Syndra, it's a lot of two blocks. This is why she doesn't typically tend to block a lot. Or if she does, she has to usually do two cards for anything past the natural break point of a three, like in a four. So, I think she takes a lot of damage, but she hopes to return more damage the next turn. I think that taking all the damage and really prone to the disruption, she doesn't want to block at all, is an inherent weakness in her class as well. And I don't know if
Yeah.
that's all ninjas, because I'm not familiar, because Katsu kind of rolled out of the scene when I was coming in strong. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ninja's kind of an interesting class because, well, for instance, a card like Flick Flack, which is a
Yeah.
0 for 4 block, one of the strongest block cards in the game. Like, you can design Ninja in a way that blocks quite well. But yeah, the way sort of current Syndra lists are running, like they definitely do not run these high block cards, so that is a definite weakness. But that would be, I guess, an example of something I would consider not an inherent weakness, because like while Syndra doesn't block very well sort of in the red line versions of her that people like to play, you can add cards like Flick Flag, cards like Sink Below, these more defensive oriented cards to sort of get around that.
Mm,
The issue then, of course, becomes your primary game plan gets worse the more defensive you become.
right.
Yeah, right.
And I noticed that with Fang going to midline or mid range, I put some D reacts in there, and I was like, more is better, right, fellas? And so until I was playing against New and realized that New was trying to pass and deck me out, and I drew a handful of D reacts, and thankfully I had one draconic reaction and enough ability to pitch to clear it. Right? So that was a lucky thing. I got myself out that situation, but it could have been very bad because, again, it doesn't really go to Fang's plan if you go all defense, right? So
Yeah, that's something you kind of have to identify when you're building your hero, right? Because like you could add those cards to Syndra, but at that point you're straying so far from what the deck like wants to be doing. You may just want to pivot to like another ninja, like Ira. You know, she's probably
I,
better. For, like
I've
doing
tried it. I've tried the mid range
Really?
Syndra, remember?
Oh yeah, you did try mid range Syndra.
It wasn't good.
Yeah,
so let's say
it's
with
interesting.
and I like to speak to brutes because I know their inherent built-in weaknesses. They have to draw and discard a lot of times to get a lot of their effects,
Hmm.
right? And some does it better than others, KO, but at the cost of his arm, right? I'm not sure if those that don't play KO know, but he only has one arm weapon capabilities, and he lost the second arm. I know. One day that arm's going to come back.
One day.
When he gets hit with Humble, it comes back.
That's right.
So, and then that's true. And then scabskin leathers, right? Is that a weakness of the class, or is that an inherent? Is
That's
that an
your
inherent?
weakness.
What's that?
That's your weakness, Will, because you see scabs and you roll it and then you hit a one.
Yeah, so I would say
Where's the lie?
that's Will's
Yeah.
natural weakness, but not a natural weakness of the class itself.
But yeah.
So
No, but for sure, Brew has RNG is
Yeah.
like one of their big weaknesses, right? Like intimidates random, draw discards random, a lot of random discards. Like
yeah,
that's
and I guess
you can't really plan your turn.
yeah, I think that's the best way of saying it is the RNG factor for brutes. But a lot of their cards are at least on rate or above rate, right, with minimum
Mhm. Yeah.
effort. So
Which like offsets it. Like it's
Mhm.
big damage, but it's you might not be able to do what you want. It's kind of like up in the air.
So do you think it's important to when you look at a class first and then look at the specific hero to start diving into what their inherent class weakness is? Like we said with ninjas, it's lower defensive value on a lot of their cards that they would really like in their deck.
I feel like if you're just starting to get into the game, we'll say, and you're looking at classes, I think it'd be definitely be a lot more interesting to look at their strengths rather than what are all the weaknesses, right? Because it's I think it's important to recognize the weakness of either the class or the specific hero, but definitely you would hopefully be building your deck to the strengths of that class or hero first, and then you would try to balance it the other way a little bit to make sure you don't get completely screwed.
So let's say they pick up their class and they're looking at it and they want to get better. They realize that hey, I really like this class, and that's when they'll start looking at their weakness. So everyone's journey, of course, is a little bit different
Mhm.
at the point in which they reach this conclusion. Like, hey, I love my deck. It has a lot of gas, but I need to see what parts that are really kind of slowing it down or not playing toward my natural game plan. Eventually, they'll have to have this analysis to get better. Is that like a correct conclusion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And it's
for
like a
the
pretty oh
go ahead, Trevor. I'm
sorry, I
sorry.
was gonna say it's a pretty natural process, right? Because you'll be playing your games and then you'll just see like something not working, right? And it could be like playing aggro into Jarl or something. You're like, oh, this ice is like really slowing me down. Like, maybe a few more blues would help me out here so I can get around it,
Mm.
right? Like you'll be just as you play the deck, you'll learn what the weaknesses are and like what matchups are tough.
And I know by the time this comes out, PQ would have been yesterday, fellas. And I am terrified of the Jarl matchup with my Fang. But
Mhm.
I heard Epot, the one that gives you two resources,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
is a good tech against his cards sometimes. So I don't know. One of might work. I might try it out. Right? Because it can stay on the field. It's 0 cost, so it doesn't really interfere with his game plan. And it's a blue pitch in case you don't ever need it. But generally speaking, when you get this, you end the chain with this and then pass the turn anyways. Because his second dagger usually gets go again and you hit this out and you kind of wait for that. Is it the blizzard that really messes people up?
Yeah, Blizzard's pretty good. Channel Lake is also very good.
Yeah.
Channel rigid. Yeah.
I'm a Jarl lover myself. Though that kind of comes to an interesting point, in my opinion, for how to think about sideboarding specifically. Because I play Jarl, and I've actually removed Blizzard from my deck. Because Blizzard is a card that is very strong against aggro heroes. Originally, I had it in as a 3 of.
Mhm.
But the more I played it, the more I realized, hey, all these aggro decks, I kind of like I can beat them very easily, even without Blizzard, right?
Mhm.
And one thing, when you get better at sideboarding, that becomes apparent is you do not have very many sideboard slots. I am constantly trying to figure out how do I squeeze in one more sideboard card, one more piece of arcane barrier, some spell void, just something. But so Blizzard is a good sideboard card against a matchup that I think I am very comfortable in, right? I think it's important to identify, hey, what are the matchups you're not comfortable in, right? And then start thinking about, like, what can I add to my deck to make that matchup more comfortable?
Okay.
hmm Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's like you're kind of just like trying to win more when you put the Blizzard in, right? Like you're already
Yeah.
winning there, so what's the point?
Gotcha. It's kind of like the scab skin things. You were winning your head, and then you roll scab skins because you're being cheeky, and you roll that one, and it just kind of kills you. I got you. So you don't want to win more by bidding cards that will slow your deck down if drawn at inappropriate times. That's one of your weaknesses, right?
Sometimes, Will, it's just there so you can block for 3. All right, just
Most
accept
of the time.
that fate.
Do you guys have a Will mentioning rolling scabs counter?
You could get one.
Well, for those viewers at home that are above the age of 21, please consider this a drinking game. Right? If I mention brutes or scabskins, and the thing is, I haven't even played brute consistently in over 9 months, 6 months. I can't remember, but so let's talk about like the actual nitty gritty of the game, right? Like, or not the game itself, but the deck in context of the game, right? You're saying when you're building deck, you have to really look at what's flowing with your deck. Like Blizzard didn't really do anything for you because you already were pretty comfortable in those aggro matchups. But I know, like, and I'll use Fang because that's who I'm on right now. Um, he doesn't like to run a lot of blues, and there's a perfect amount with blues and his equipment that you have to consider. Where once every 2 hands, you should have a blue card in your hand, and the thought that is to kind of generate the vigor token based off the tunic, not the tunic, but the blood grain.
Grains of blood spill.
That's it, grains of blood still. I knew we brought you on for a reason, Evan. Thank you for keeping me in line. So let's talk about pitch and balance. How do you guys recognize pitch and balance in a deck when you're initially cooking? Let's say you picked your hero, you like your hero, you want to get good with your hero, and now you're trying to take it apart and you're being card diologist.
Are you asking how do you recognize it after you first build it without playing it yet?
How about a little bit of both? Because sometimes it could seem good, and then you take it to a different meta, a larger meta, or the meta changes, and you realize it's not great anymore. Or you played with your friends, you played on Talishar, and we know Talishar isn't indicative of real playing if you pick up into the general pop. It is, but it's you get a lot more people that quit easily or jump out the games or whatever. So,
but I think for testing your deck, well, all right, well, it's a multi-step, right? So first is you just built your deck without playing anybody. How can you tell whether or not your deck flows the way you want? And I think the term that I've heard recently is it's called goldfishing. So like you just take your deck and then you draw 4 cards, and then you see, okay, with these 4 cards, with my hero, with the equipment, with my weapon, what can I do with these 4 cards? How do I make it move smoothly? You play your cards, and then you draw 4 cards again, and you do it a few times, see how it feels. I personally take it a step further sometimes, where I take a look at it, say, hey, what is the optimal thing I could do here, and then what is the second optimal thing. And what that means is, if I lost a card, if I lost 2 cards, what would my line look like? So I'll say, oh, I pretended to block. Maybe there was, attack coming for 6 on hit that was about to happen. I block for 2, so now I discard 2 cards. I play 1 card to do something, and then I arsenal it. How does that feel? How does my resource pitchingness look like? If I pitch something, do I have too many resources floating by the end of my turn? Or do I consistently not have enough resources to do the thing that I want? And so that's all pre-playing somebody. And then once I actually play somebody, then I cry a bit more than that. That's generally my game plan on that.
And you mentioned goldfishing. I think we all have different variations of what we're looking for when we goldfish. Like for me, it's can you utilize the whole resources you have in your hand? Like I know, and this is something I learned actually a little bit later on when I first started playing Flesh and Blood. It's not good to keep cards in your hand. You really want to use up your whole hand in some kind of form or fashion. Now, for a lot of new players, this might seem like common sense, but in practicality, it's a little bit harder to execute than a lot of people would think, right? Because you can clunk up your hand. If you guys ever experienced like IPing yourself unintentionally, and that's intellect penalty each card being held on, and you're like, oh, I should have used this in some form. And again, it's like when I'll use Fang again, with Fang's online, you have blue cards that really don't do much for you. That's where you kind of pitch it to create the vigor or create the +1 on the second weapon swing with his bracers, right? That's how you kind of use it up. Or have those blues that actually do something for you, like Mark, discard Mark, right? How about you guys? Like, how do you look at the IP?
I mean, definitely, I think one of the big ones, and once again, this comes from playing something like Guardian, let's say. Sometimes you swing a big card, your opponent says, I cannot let this hit, so they full block with their whole hand. Mm-hmm. And then as a Guardian player, you then drop, you're given a 4-card hand, and Guardians run a lot of blue cards, so you might just have 4 blue cards in your hand. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot more helpful when the blue cards, because generally you block with blue cards, you pitch blue cards. Mm-hmm. And if those blue cards can also do something powerful in this sort of situation, that's going to help you quite a lot in the long run.
Yeah, so it does like double duty. And like Florian, who's kind of plays like a Guardian sometimes, at least with the Reaping Blade build, you would run cards like
Trot-along.
Yeah, he already knows. Because like it's a blue block 3, right? So it does like that great, but then if you get left with it, it still functions, right? So like
Trevor loves Trot-along.
I do love Trot-along.
As much as I love talking about scab skins, I think Trevor is probably the second. This is Trevor's second most mentioned card. It's not nearly as much as I mentioned scabs, but yeah, he preaches Trot-along, right? Well, I get it though.
I just want to know when this specific character comes out as a hero.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's been around. He's the same guy as the belittle or the
middle. No, it upsets me. All you young and all you new Flesh and Blood players know him as the Trot-along guy. He's the minnowism belittle guy. Come on.
No, he's Trot-along guy now.
Just trot along, man. Just trot along.
Well, the most important title supersedes all previous titles, and Trot-along is kind of like his title now, right? Anyways,
true.
So trotting along, I know Ning, you mentioned this, and actually you mentioned it first. I didn't understand why Ira used a lot of the cards that she did, so I would talk to him. He's like, well, that's about the cost curve. And I'm ashamed to admit, but it was probably just a few weeks before we actually started the podcast. I was like, what the cost curve? Yeah, and I didn't realize that it's not good to have extra resources when you pass your turn. Like, you really need to play efficiently, or at least think about that, right? And once he said it, it was so succinct and so simple. I was like, a bullet, right? And that's something that I never really thought about when I constructed my deck or looked for inspiration online. I was like, oh, but the cost curve makes more sense when he explained it. Ning, do you want to talk about that a little bit and then see the other guys' thoughts?
Well, I think it kind of goes along with what I was saying earlier, right? Like when you test your deck, you want to see how much energy or how much resources you have left by the time you finish your turn, right? Because let's say you do all the things you wanted to do in the most efficient way you can do it, and for whatever reason, you keep ending with 2 extra resources or 1 extra resource. Well, that means that you didn't need to have so many blues in your deck probably, or maybe you need a stronger version, more reds, or if all of your cards cost 0 and you have all these blues and you keep ending up with 2 extra resource, maybe consider adding more cards that cost 1 or cost 2, right? So that you have stronger cards to kind of fix that curve, right? Because we were talking about an earlier episode, we talked about value, how much value you're extracting and how much value you can use, right? So effectively, if you have 2 resources floating, then that means you lost 2 value, really, because those 2 resources that were floating could have been translated into 2 extra damage somewhere. So instead of a 0 for 4, you could have played a 2 for 6 and eked out 2 more damage. And generally speaking, there's some effect that's attached to that as well. And so I know, like, one of the very first iterations of the Syndra deck was like complete red line, except for 3 brands, yellow brand of the Cinderclaw, right? There was no blues at all as far as I could tell. And I'm sure there was the original game plan was probably, oh, well, I can attack with mostly 0 for 3s or 0 for 4s. I can get my daggers back, and I don't need that extra resource to do whatever my game plan is. And in a pinch, 2 damage is better than 1 damage. I assume that's the thought that went into that before people figured it out or whatever. But that's just part of the cost curve of, if you don't need to have extra resource, don't have extra resource.
Yeah. I think like that deck specifically was just, they were banking on they could get the resource whenever they wanted, or one resource, because they could do the flick knives into blood splattered whatever.
Right.
So that's kind of like what their cost curve was. It was like always on demand, where they could get the resource when they needed it.
I think a good first indicator as well, while we're sort of on this for cost curves, is weapons, right? You were mentioning Ira before with the Kodachis. Ira's a hero that very much wants to swing Kodachi for 1 with Go Again, Kodachi for 2 with Go Again, into some third card, right? And since swinging with 2 Kodachis costs 2 resources, often enough, the third card you wanted to swing for, you want it to cost 1 to line up with a single blue pitch card, right? So 1 for 5s became the norm, and a lot of powerful 0 for 4s just got pushed to the wayside just because they were less efficient. Why swing for 4 when you can swing for 5?
Kind of tuning
going along.
Yeah,
because even though like it is a red, like, powerful card, as Ning stated, like, you're technically losing value just by like the deck choice.
interesting.
The only deck that I felt like didn't really follow the rules of cost curve was Red Ball Theory, just because to be able to swing your dagger, you needed blues or yellows, but then to play your 2 for 6s, you only needed a red that had a stealth on it. So it got very weird to figure out what a correct cost curve was for that kind of deck. But everything else, I feel like, generally falls the same rule of needing a cost curve.
So you're talking about cost curves, IPing. How about clunky hands? When we Goldfish and we're searching up our 4 cards and shuffling and searching up 4 more cards, like, it sounds like Ninja could be stuck with sometimes blue cards and a non-attack, right? Rare, but it might happen, right? So at what point do you go back to seeing, oh, this is just natural variance, it is card game, versus that this is actually a deck design flaw, right? Like, I, as the cook, added a little too much spice in this recipe to make it any good, right? So how many times do you go before you start taking out blues, or is it a natural feel, a natural progression over time?
I personally say if I've gone through at least like 2 or 3 turns in a row where I couldn't do any part of my game plan, then something is probably wrong and I need to investigate. So maybe that includes hey, I have this card that costs 2, and I drew all reds three turns in a row, that's probably an indicator that something went wildly wrong. Or for like Phi, for example, his weapon only gets go again if it's the second draconic chain in the combat chain. And so if every for the next 2-3 turns I draw cards, but I'm not able to get to the second chain link that is draconic, then there's probably something wrong with that as well. Like that means, oh, I need more draconic chain starters to be able to do my game plan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think more recently, I could even mention when Assassins were being built after the Hudson came out, there was a lot of mixed play with let's mix in buffs that target stealth attacks and then buffs that target daggers, and they're trying to hodgepodge these two together, but found out they were kind of, you know, failing to execute both game plans. So when they were like, oh, stealth attacks is more natural for, let's say, Mario, and they realized that, well, that's more of a better game plan for Slippy, and then Mario's now more focused on the dagger build, right? But initially, no, I don't think our meta really focused on the dagger build. You can correct me if I'm wrong, guys. Is that like a way where it just naturally progressed? Like people throw everything into the pot and then see what comes out, and then they start refining it, or like how does this happen when you're initially constructing?
Yeah, I mean, like when I was playing Azuri and trying to figure out anything, historically, everybody just puts all the majestic stealth cards in your deck, no matter what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we all know how strong Bonds of Agony is, right?
Mhm.
You play 3 attack reactions, and then you get to strip cards away, and everything magical is doing what it does. But the problem with Azuri is it's actually pretty difficult to get 3 attack reactions consistently, because Azuri is not Mario, is not Slippy. So you can't sidestep as easy, and you can't it's not like new where you can just break 1 armor piece and suddenly 2 attack reactions have already worked. And so I actually took those out, or maybe I only included left 1 in there. So it's just whenever you see a card every single time, and if it feels clunky, then maybe you should remove it, reduce the count by 1, or maybe just remove it completely if you've played it multiple times and you've actually never seen yourself play it, and then you just always either block with it or pitch it, because there could be better blues out there.
There is, of course, and you guys sort of touched on it, but identifying important ratios of cards.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking more, before we were talking red, yellow, blue, but I'm talking more of like specific to certain decks. You need to identify, for instance, when talking about Phi, you need starters. You need to figure out how many starters do I need in this deck. Starters are very powerful. They also don't block very well, so you can't have too many of them. Mm-hmm. For Assassin, for instance, we're talking about what kind of attack reactions do you want, but if you draw a hand with 4 attack reactions in it, that is a really bad hand. And I myself am a Azalea player. Mm-hmm. And when you draw an all buff hand, look at your opponent and say, pass the turn. It's not a great feeling.
Yeah.
So sort of minimizing these sort of moments when there's no sort of agency from your point, you just have to just have a bad turn is kind of important.
Mm-hmm. Do you think decks that have an over-reliance on power cards, you're talking about like the game plan, but like buff cards or whatnot, but some of these cards are above rate because they are majestics. But do you think some decks could over-rely on power cards to just like hit it's all powerful cards in the deck and let's see what happens? Or like, do you think you could always, like, too much of a good thing of these power cards, can it overclunk your hand? Or can it just jam down your deck because it's too much power but doesn't really flow together? Like, is that sometimes what you find with Azalea as well? Or
to a certain extent, I think a good example for most Azalea lists is Codex of Bloodrot. Not as powerful as the Codex everybody knows about, Codex of Frailty, one of the most powerful cards in the game. But Codex of Bloodrot gives your opponent a Bloodrot, which is essentially 2 value because it deals 2 damage. and then gives you a ponder token. And if we assume like a random draw is 3 value, this is essentially a 0 for 5 go again, which is really strong. Yeah, this is a very powerful card. Unfortunately, if you draw multiples, having multiple ponder tokens, it's kind of diminishing returns, right? Having 2 ponders is far worse than just having 1. So Codex of Bloodrot is a card I never want to see more than 1 of at a time. And because of that, I went from a 3 of to a 2 of. So even though it's one of the strongest cards in my deck, it is one of those cards where I say, this card is really bad in situations where I see too many of them, or multiple in one hand at a time. So that's why I've cut it down to 2 copies. And there are probably similar situations. I don't know if any of you guys have like examples of that.
Yeah, building my Syndra deck, Oath of Loyalty got really annoying when I kept drawing 2 of those. Or Lord forbid, there was one time I Goldfish 3 of them in a row. So, you know, for all that don't know, you can only use it as the first action in a turn. So if you have a second and a third one, you can't do anything with them. So I guess the best way to use them at that point is to block for 3, which is still good value. But ideally, you wouldn't want to do that. You would just want to shoot 4 damage over. So I've reduced this card from a 3 to a 2 as well.
That's pretty spicy though, because you usually see these run as 3 ofs in Syndra decks. You know, I know Fang likes 3 of because he can usually arsenal the third. If he draws 2, he arsenal the second one. It's a great starter. One thing I am playing around with Fang itself is to reduce the pledge penalties from 3 to 2. And that's more, it's great early game, first 2 turns, 3 turns, you really like to see it. I'm not having a problem getting online fast, but I'm having a problem drawing that card late game when I have other sidesteppers that are more effective later game, right? The ones that, have more value. And Fang's pretty much a value deck sometimes. So you don't want to see those early. So I'm playing around with it. I did cut Endear Devotion completely, which is the 1 cost Draconic Reaction that people were on at first, but realized that 1 cost early game is really detrimental to his game plan. Just kind of clunked him down. And this is a really powerful card because it creates a fealty token that your opponent cannot interact with, right? And that's always a good thing. Issue is it costs 1, and Fang in the initial stages might not have that 1 to be able to devote to this, right? Even though, because he's running a very slimmed count of blue. I've seen anywhere from 6 to sometimes 9 or 12. I run 8 myself. I find that's a good number. But that's one of those that I've found just kind of clunked me down. And I think the other one was the 4 attack, 0 cost that you could play this after you played another red card.
Blaze Headlong?
That's the one. When I was on the Facebook and Fang forums, I mentioned I don't run these in my deck, and a lot of people were questioning that decision. So I don't miss it. Every time I drew this, I kind of hated it, right? 50-50. But Evan, you got a spicy take on that?
No, I'm just shocked because I like this card quite a lot too.
Yeah. I might put it back in because I'm running into the problem of too many D-reacts and not enough attacks, but that might be for very specific matchups. But this would be a sideboard, not a main card, right? So I went too heavy on the D-reacts to go midline. Love that, but I realized it does put me in a position sometimes where I need a little bit more attack. So that might fit back in, but I'm not sure if it'll be even a 3 of, right? So, and that's kind of like the over-reliance of too much of a good thing is, in fact, a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
Trevor, did you have any points? I know you run a lot of Dash and Max. Sorry.
We don't talk about Max anymore.
I love Max. Please.
I do too. I can't stay away. Or can't. Whatever.
But do you have any examples with you where it was like too much of a good thing is a bad thing?
Yeah, I mean, like Dio for sure. Like your item ratio in your deck is like very important, right? Because like the most powerful thing you can do is play your items off the top. But if your deck's all items, then it's terrible. So I mean, we tried it. I think pretty much everyone does like 1/4 of your deck is items. Is like pretty standard. But yeah, I mean, and then the rest is just like boost cards, pretty much, and like a couple blues to like get there.
And honestly, I think I know we're talking about building your own decks, but I myself have also, like, if you're curious about a ratio, Like
Mhm.
for instance, for me, it
Oh.
was Azalea buffs versus arrows. Look it up,
Yeah. Like go on Fabry, look at like a deck list or like
Yeah.
whatever's doing good
Like,
in a tournament.
yeah, and then just even if you don't want to like copy the deck, like
Mhm.
using those ratios as like a starting point
Yeah.
is never a bad idea.
Yeah, and then like you can do it pretty organically, right? If you add like a few more 2-cost cards, like maybe like add a blue, you know?
Yeah.
Like just try to keep the ratio like somewhat intact, and then you can play with it, see what happens. Because you won't mess it up that bad, honestly. There's a lot of wiggle room.
Interesting. And I know I've done that sometimes when I'm hitting a wall. I'll go online for inspiration. Like, and I discovered, like, again, I'll talk about Fang. Josh Lau started putting slap happies in his deck, which I don't think any. And Josh Lau is a warrior main, plays warriors, only goes to major tournaments, plays warriors. He's part of the card guys. He's known as a warrior stan. Is that pretty accurate, guys? Right. But then he had a Fang deck tech, and I had to see what Josh was cooking, and this man recommended slap happies, and I didn't think about this at all. I mean, Evan, was this a surprise to you? Did you know that Fangs sometimes run this?
No, Slap Happy it's a fun card.
It makes more sense than Take It on the Chin, though, for Fang specifically, right? Because Fang can always get go again, and if you can't, your turn is shot anyway. So it's better just to have that free energy or resource.
Yeah.
If you were to go that route.
And again, we're talking about finding inspiration for people online. And once you get to a deck that kind of performs well, all right, and that's kind of the fun experiment too. Like use your own inspiration. They go online and compare your deck with other winning tournament winning decks to see how much it matches up, and ask yourself why they started including these cards and what's their justification for it. That's a thought exercise that I think any new player or any person that's trying to get stronger with the deck could really grow into. Like, why don't they run this card, versus the card you're running and you're all passionate about? So, and I put it in Slap Happies, and I gotta say it's always performed very well when I use them in every game I use them in, right? Because that Vigor token was so helpful. In fact, it just, like against Prism, it was able to generate that token where I used that token the next turn to really go off on the Prism and was able to get massive value because of that one Vigor token it generated. Or it starts your Vigor train, pitching it to the Grains of Blood Spill to create the Vigor tokens, keep that rolling. So, and sometimes, because if you think about Valiant Dynamo, so you block one, and you think about his 2 blocks reactions, and you think about this, it's 5. It's a natural, it stops a lot of things from the boots, and this is a 3 block, and you get the Vigor token, so it's really a 4 card, or it's 1 card for value, right? 3 value on face, but then the boots, so you guys kind of get what I'm saying here, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that's something with a lot of these cards, I think, is like really cool, and it's a good way to sort of think about like when you add some of these spicier includes like Slap Happy, is like ask your question, why am I adding this card and where does it help? For instance, Slap Happy is a cool card because, as you said, it can sort of shore up turns where you need the resources while also blocking, but it's also damage prevention. So it works against something like Kano, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a very good card against Kano, a matchup that Fang historically has done very, very poor against.
That's a shake hands and go get lunch if you're really hungry or tired. Right? It's almost an unwinnable matchup.
Sometimes
Usually.
if they don't expect the Slap Happy, sometimes you can just roll over.
And you can slap them and be happy about it. I hear you.
Yeah, you can. There you go.
Yeah, I feel like that. So when I first started playing, I never net decked when I was building my Azuri, and so there was a lot of trial by error. And at the beginning of all this, I didn't have a single defense reaction in my deck.
Yeah.
So no 0 for 4s or any of the traps that are 0 for 3s, but then give some effect if certain conditions are met. But then, I did realize my hands would get kind of clunky, or maybe I would block however I block. But then it's like, well, if I need to block anyway, why aren't I getting more value out of blocking? And so that's kind of when I introduced traps and sink belows in my deck, right? Because there was clunkiness, so I needed sink belows to fix my hand. And then also at the time the meta was heavy hitters. So there were warriors about, or there was a lot of people going wide for whatever reason, guardians aside. And so I started to include, or there was people going tall. So really, I actually sideboarded all three of the traps: the inertia traps, the frailty traps, and the blood rot traps. And then depending on who I would play against, I would, switch out. Like for example, if I went against a guardian, I would take out my blood rot and then put in the inertia because there was more benefit for doing that. Or if I was playing against a warrior, then I would put in both frailty and blood rot because warriors generally have a go again and they generally do attack reactions. So that was definitely a learning point for me. Just to like, oh, this helps my deck feel a little better and also helps eke out a little bit more value.
Well, I guess before we continue on to some of the other things like the myths, and those being busted, I'd like to talk about, you grab this hero and you try to fit a game plan that doesn't match with the hero's natural vibe, right? It's like trying to fit that square into a circle peg, right? Or vice versa. You know what I mean? It just doesn't happen. And Evan, I heard this mentioned before. I actually have it in the show notes as this example, but I didn't know you tried this. Trying to play Fatigue with Syndra was an example of a game plan and a hero that does not match up, right? Do you want to explain that real quick? And when you realized that you were going down a rabbit hole that didn't pay the dividends?
Yeah, so essentially, I was playing an Ira deck, but with Syndra cards, essentially. And in theory, it was a good idea. The keyword in theory, because Ira, you can play very defensively. Like, you can play Ira as like an almost fatigue deck, and it's actually pretty good. The issue being is there are some matchups where fatigue, like against combo heroes, against like Kano, for instance, against Verdance, where if the game goes on long enough, you just lose. And the sort of fatigue-oriented deck I was building was having issues beating these sort of more combo-oriented decks. So I said, man, I really want to keep all these cards that block well, but I really want them to also have go again. And then I looked at Syndra and I said, wait a second, Syndra has a lot of like cards that block well that also have go again. And that's where it happened. I designed a Syndra list to be more defensive, and it looked pretty good on paper. Some issues, though, are, of course, Kodachi's versus her kunai. Her kunai,
it's a pain in the butt.
they go away after a while. And so that definitely gave the deck some issues.
At what point did you give up on your game plan? Did you play it a few times? Did you play at Armory? Like, what was or did you Goldfish it, play Talish? What was your method for going through the pain points and figuring this game plan is dead in the water, no pun intended, because High Sea's coming out. But, like, at what point did you find it dead in the water?
Yeah. I tried it on Talish. I did bring it to a local Armory once where Trevor killed me. But, yeah, in essence, in a lot of ways, it just felt like bad Ira. Like, the turns weren't lining up. There were turns where I wanted to have 2 daggers in play, 2 kunai in play, but one of them was in the graveyard, right? So theoretically, when you're goldfishing it, the turns line up because when you start goldfishing, you always have the 2 kunai out, and you say, "Hey, all these turns look really strong." But when you actually get into practice, all of a sudden, there were turns where I said, "Hey, I really want to," as we were talking about early, pitch a blue, swing with everything in my hands, but with only one kunai up, I was losing out on quite a lot of value.
That's actually a good point, though. Like, when we goldfish at, like, pretty much the highest strength we have, right? So, you're saying, and to Ning's point he mentioned earlier, sometimes it's better to do it in an optimum way, even though it might not be ideal to see how it plays out. But take away a piece of equipment, see how it operates then. Or in your case, take away one of your daggers and see how your deck still works out. right? I like that point. All right. So is there anything else you guys want to talk about before we move on to the next piece? Okay.
No, I think I'm all right.
Yep.
Evan, I know you're a long time fan of the podcast.
Oh,
um,
I'm fangirling all over.
we have a MythBuster section, and this is something that we just like to do. And it's just kind of fun because sometimes we hear about what makes a card so great, or if we hear this thing, it's because we hear it from a more experienced player. But since we're a learning journey podcast, and since we're targeting multiple players, we like to do a MythBuster section, right? And so I'll gather up a couple myths that I've seen online or I've heard about, I've even experienced, and we'll bust the myth. And I'm hoping what happens is I learn a little bit from it and I could take it and selfishly grow better at the game myself, right? So, first myth is if it wins, it's a good deck.
No.
Hey,
Listen.
my Corsham deck, all right. My Corsham deck did fine. Okay, it's won. It's an okay deck. Okay.
The reason why I brought the Syndrome mid range deck to the Armory is because I played it on Talishar. I won 4 games in a row, and I said, "Whoa!" I said, "Whoa!"
This is next level.
Yeah.
I was like, "I am a genius, Michael Hamilton. Watch out!"
You're a big brain player, and yeah, I got you.
And then I went 0-3 at the Armory, and I said, "Oh, okay."
Oh, that's right. My locals is a mini battle hardened every week. I forgot.
It is.
It really is, man. It's like going into the Army is like a day two, man. And our late game days, what Justin was saying, another local, they're strong, man. Trevor, did you have a point to this? If it wins, it's a good deck.
No, that's not the case. I did the exact same thing with the Max deck. I won like 3 games on Talishar. It was like, we're cooking. Showed up to the Armory, got a 3. Like, yeah.
I mean, it's like any deck, like, because we're all humans. We when we think of a crazy strategy, you always think of like the high roll. You always think, hey, this is the best case scenario. It's like, whoa, what if this happens? And
Great.
sometimes you do just get the high roll. Sometimes your opponent low rolls. Sometimes you high roll. Sometimes they misplay. And you have to give it enough time to basically say, like, hey, I'm winning, but am I winning consistently enough? And importantly, and am I winning because of the spicy stuff I'm doing? Or am I winning because, like, I'm just such a good player?
Yeah. I mean, I don't win often enough to make this as a myth bust, but I figured you guys all had stories. So I do know that sometimes, and this just takes into account like when I used to play poker, when I used to play other card games, that when you go to different scenes, different metas, different, online versus in person, brick and mortar, they all play a little differently anyways. But in our case, yeah, our meta's really strong, and I found it in the reverse. I didn't win consistently until we went down to Florida, and all of a sudden I 4-0'd a small side event. First time I ever 4-0'd, and it was with Acilio, right? And this is like the world premiere, and I was like, well, this is the first time, guys. And it's not because the people in my area was weak. It's just because I didn't know how strong our meta was at the time, and it just kind of connected the dots. So, our sometimes you guys, our local metas doesn't bring out the big decks that they usually play at the bigger tournaments. This was in the case for like a lot of the Arknight character, Viscerai, Kano, right? Things of this sort don't usually pop up in our local sometimes. More so now, it kind of fluctuates, or even like the OTK Florian, that didn't make an appearance, but these decks are floating out there because they win tournaments, but our locals don't bring them in because they don't really care to play that style, especially with people they know and friends with. All right, so yeah, if it wins, it's a good deck. Definitely busted, right? Every card needs to be high impact.
I think every card just needs to be in your deck for a reason.
Mm.
I don't think that's. Yeah, I suppose it's debatable what high impact means. If your deck doesn't have a blue to do the thing that you want to do, then arguably your card is a low end card. Sometimes a blue that coincidentally blocks 3 is good enough because you get 3 resources out of it.
Ning, are we gonna have the argument? Is Trot Along a high impact card?
Dude.
Hey, it lets him
Oh.
swing by itself too, you know?
Dude, it's gonna be an all-star gravy bones. Just wait. It's gonna be crazy.
Dude,
No.
Honestly, it probably will.
but to
Yeah.
Trevor's point, he always said it's not because it's, such a high impact card, but what it does, it's a blue block 3 that actually has some upside in a lot of the decks he pits it in. Because the go again on a 3 attack or less doesn't have non-relevance, right? So I mean, we make fun of Trot Along, but it's still a blue block 3 for 0 cost. That's a fantastic card on face value alone. It might not be good in some decks. And I mentioned Rhinar in this case because there's a lot of blue fillers for Rhinar that's just a blue block 3 with hopefully some upside, right? That's why we could afford to pit Nasty Surprise. Does not go toward his random discard of 6, but you have a few spots in that blue category to play around.
Will, are you saying you're gonna change out Nasty Surprise for Trot Along because you can swing your claw with it
True.
or go again?
It's
So
not
good.
bad.
Pretty
It's not-
good.
It's arguably better.
That Nasty Surprise was a Nasty Surprise only once, and it didn't win me the game, but I felt good.
Yeah.
Right? But no, it just goes to show that it doesn't have to be high impact, but it does have to be in there for a reason, right?
Yeah.
More reds equals more damage. Myth number 3.
Kind of depends. Like, I mean, we
Okay.
were talking like a red line deck can function, right? In the right
Mhm.
meta, and like if you build it correctly, like the red line Syndra was good when it first came out. But like for an average deck, like I don't know, like Guardian or whatever, like if you just slam in like 10 more reds and take 10 blues out, you're gonna have a bad time.
I mean, but even with Aurora, right? With how intense she was, if you stripped out all the blues from Aurora and you switched them out with 0 for 4s, we'll say that's probably still not a great deck because I feel like a lot of the power that came with Aurora was having blues that created embodiment of lightnings or let you swing with the sword for 2 go again naturally as well. So yeah, though that would add to its nastiness if you could get go again for free.
And I used to make this mistake a lot when I was first playing, where I was like, oh, more reds equals more power. Let's throw it in there. But I found out the term bricking exists at the same time, right? And so using 3 cards to use that one attack doesn't feel very, very good when it's a 4-card 6. No relevant on hits, right? That's a very bad
Yeah.
value. So yeah, and to people's point, like even if you go all red line, aggro doesn't mean autopilot because there is a lot of construction in the chain links and developing those chains that takes precedence. So you still have to put some thoughts into that too.
There's definitely sequencing involved if
Yeah.
it's an all red hand for sure.
And one of our locals, Jose, that's why he was still on Syndra for the longest time because he kept on saying, it's really about the sequencing and the way you play out the turn that really makes Syndra a great deck when people were kind of off the Syndra train at that time. So kudos to him, but he stuck to his guns and he knew what he was talking about. So myth 4, and this is the last myth. It's fine to have a few fun cards. Read Corsham. I'm just joking, Ning.
Hey, look, ultimately it just depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to be competitive, then no fun cards. All right. Just go as hard on the paint as you can. So like Enlightened Strike. That to me, E-Strike is not a fun card. E-Strike is a fixer upper. It's there.
What would you describe as a fun card?
Like, I don't know, like a card that can just kind of work on its own and get whatever value you want. For example, like that card has absolutely no business existing in any deck whatsoever. But like, golly, if you could pick it up first as a first draw, you play it out and you just let it ride, you could gain the silliest amount of value out of that. But I think it also just depends on what your deck is trying to do. And like when I built my Aurora Corsham deck, right, the purpose of it wasn't to be competitive, and therefore it opened a lot of doors to what I could add. So there were a lot more fun cards like Whispers, Oracle Whispers, or Whisper with Oracles, or whatever, which is red, block 3, opt 4. That's all it did. Is that a good card in an Aurora deck? Absolutely not. But it helped me push cards down so I could find the stupid tree.
You know
You know,
what's
there was a
funny?
game plan.
That's sick.
It was a core game plan.
This
Yeah,
is a
it's that-
0 block 3 that opts 2. This actually might be Spice and Reinar.
No, that one's good. He's talking about the red one.
The red one, right? Because my whole game plan with the red one is if I don't see it in the opt, I push all the cards down so I can see it soon. But then the silly thing about my deck that I never fixed is I also have the serenading Skyward Serenade, which effectively shuffles my deck anyway. So and then instead of a better D-react, I had Fate Foreseen, so I could continue to push cards down. Like, my deck was a very fun deck. It had very fun cards in it.
Well, I guess you bring up the point then, right?
For a purpose, right? But again, yeah. So you can have fun cards, but like if you're trying to be competitive, then it's harder to justify having these more fun, non-competitive cards, unless they do serve some level of purpose for this competitive deck.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you did bring up the reasoning. Ask yourself, are you playing for fun? Are you playing to be competitive? And yes, playing competitively can be fun, right? But, fun decks versus competitive decks are kind of in the two different wheelhouses, right? We can all kind of agree with that.
I also want to mention my fun deck beat Evan's
That's true.
decently competitive Ira deck. Okay.
Interesting. Right?
It beat me specifically because he was playing fun cards that I was not considering in the meta. So
exactly. Shake up the meta by doing things people don't expect.
Sometimes that's what happens. You just go with the random weird card, and the other person does a head scratch. Jorge, our local meta, did that with his Via deck. He added some cards that was really spicy. I don't even remember the names because I never seen these cards before, especially in a brute meta. But it's kind of interesting. When I thought about this myth, it's fine to have a few fun cards, and it depends. Was Yellow Pummel and Prism.
Oh yeah.
Paul joked around about it.
You were talking. I was about to say you were talking with Paul, weren't you?
We've had that conversation before. Yeah.
Well, another one of our locals, the TCG show, the big show, I think. Do you remember his?
Sinclair.
The big TCG.
Yeah, the big TCG show, Sinclair. He actually did this because he was getting frustrated with. This is before Andrew Cook took the top 8 in Worlds and Prism started fluttering out everywhere. But he started pitting Yellow Pummels and Prism to kind of curtail one of the issues he was having, and also have kind of relevant on hits that could bring back a little bit tempo, right? I didn't think it worked, and it was kind of a meme answer to a question that was asked. But it's kind of a fun take on a solution to and competitive. I don't know. That was just an interesting concept, and when I saw this myth, I had to bring that up.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yellow Pummel's what? +3 damage, and then it also takes a card away if hit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you can't play it with if your Phantasm gets popped. So
yes.
Yeah.
You're in a lot of one-cost Phantasms. So
yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Because I think when I played against a Prism who did that, right? They put a CNC in their deck, and then they played it with this, and that was interesting. Yeah.
It is interesting. I guess before we wrap the show up, one of the things I've heard before at our local is how many weaknesses can your deck inherently have before you realize it's probably not going to be viable in the tournament scene, right? Do you go even though it has a lot of weaknesses? And I mentioned, if you're going with your deck and you're like, man, I hope I don't see OTK Florian, Jarl, Prism, Kano. I mean, these are the big beefy monsters that are roaming around out there. You're going to fight 2 or 3 of them. So at what point do you?
But I feel like, what was it? Pro Tour Amsterdam? That's exactly how that Azuri won, right? Because they ran absolutely no AV in their suite at all. And I guess they dodged all of them, or maybe they just lost to one.
Mm-hmm.
They were still able to do it. So I think
Well, that was an interesting scenario where it was like, because we've talked about like sideboard slots being very like rare. Like you have so few sideboard slots, right? And I think in that meta, like rune blades were not great
yeah.
at the time, so you were really only bringing arcane barrier for Kano, and you had to bring arcane barrier 3 to stand a chance against Kano.
Right.
So the question there was, okay, Azuri, with AB3, you take
Three pieces away.
three slots in your sideboard,
Mhm.
and you go from a 0% win rate to a 10% win rate, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And is it really worth dedicating 3 sideboard slots for a 10% win rate against Kano?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He said no, and
It worked.
he won. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So
I
you're
think. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Will.
no, go ahead, Evan.
Okay, I think to sort of like further like talk about your point, I think it is very meta dependent.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are decks that I run. For instance, my current meta deck I enjoy is Azalea, and Azalea has a lot of bad matchups that just are not relevant in the current meta. Like for instance, KO for the longest time has been non-existent in the current meta, and I think KO is very good into Azalea. It's a matchup that I have ignored at Battle Hardened Atlanta, for instance. I did not bring any KO tech at all,
Mm-hmm.
and unsurprisingly, I did not face a KO.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think like the moment you have multiple bad matchups into top decks, and when I say bad matchup, I'm talking like unwinnable, like as I sort of described, like a 90-10 matchup
Mm-hmm.
against top decks, then unless you're okay with that, you might consider switching to a different deck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So at what point? How many bad matchups if you're going to a tournament? Let's say Battle Hearted. How many bad matchups can you have before you say I shouldn't probably bring this?
I
Well,
would.
sorry.
I'm thinking, yeah.
Mhm.
I guess a good example is Victor. I love Victor. I
Mhm.
love that smile. I love that guy sitting on his back. Don't know his name, but Victor is a hero that is really good into certain decks. For instance, Aurora was very strong. He was very strong into Aurora.
Mm.
He was very very weak into Enigma. Though if you teched properly, you could beat Enigma. He was very weak into New. Once again, if you tech properly, you can beat New. And he basically loses to Kano, right? So these are 3 different matchups. You cannot beat Kano, and then the other 2 matchups you can beat, but you need to like heavily sideboard in, and then it becomes like maybe a 35-65, right?
Mm.
And at that point, all 3 of these decks are relevant. You should expect to see them in tournaments,
Mm-hmm.
or back then, anyways. Some of these heroes have LL'd, but so because of that, yeah, unfortunately, like I just can't consider Victor with so many bad matchups that you can't account for with your sideboard.
Mm-hmm.
And Trevor, Ning, did you guys have a thought on this?
No thoughts, just sadness that I can't play Azuri very well because of that.
Yeah, I know. I think you nailed it. I mean, I think it's kind of like what percentage of the room it's going to be, right? Because like if you have a terrible matchup in the Kano, but let's just say Kano is like very unpopular and nobody likes Kano, then like it's fine to bring your hero, right? But like if you're like Kano's like the most popular deck, like 75% of the people are going to be all playing it, then
Yeah.
don't bring your guy.
And I kind of say in the Kano Prism matchup, when Prism's relevant in the meta, there's a lot of poppers in a lot of people's sideboards, taking these valuable sideboard slots to Evan's point. And then not a lot of AB because you only have a very specific amount of sideboard slots, as you said. And then, at that point, Kano eats well. But then everyone starts taking for Kano, taking out the poppers because they need AB, and then Prism eats well. So you kind of got alternating heroes that kind of sometimes do really well at these tournaments, and people start skewing one way or another. And that's what I find. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm going to go with Fang to the Pro Tour, which would, when this airs, come be yesterday, and
The
we'll
Pro
see.
Tour.
Or not, sorry, Pro Tour. I don't know why I said that.
Yes, you're not there yet, Will. You're not there yet.
One day, I'm dreaming big, Ning. I'm dreaming big.
You're not
Um,
going
One-
to Singapore.
once you win the Pro Quest, we'll take you to Singapore.
Yeah.
okay, well, I'm just hoping for the gold card. I'm gonna be like Flavor Flav, have it around my neck. Hey, that's gonna be a joke that no one gets below a certain age. But do you guys have anything else you want to say before we start rolling off?
No, just play with your deck, see how it feels. If it doesn't feel right, tweak it, and if it feels better, keep going at it. If it doesn't, then go the other way. Simple as that.
Yeah, comment below your spiciest card. If it's spicier than Corsham, we'll give you a cookie.
Hey, look, Diabolic Ultimatum may be coming back with all these gosh darn allies from the Necromancer. Who can say?
What is Diabolic?
Read
That
it.
is-
It's totally worth it. It's just as good as a Semblance. I think that's the other card that I brought that I know. Yeah, if you pitch an attack action card to play this, then you can have your opponent destroy an ally. It's totally worth.
Pretty
Nice.
good.
And then if you pitch a non-attack action card, then you can help the Gravy Bones destroy their loan shark after they
Dude.
already got to go.
I'm reading this card. I'm looking at the cost and the block value, and it's like I'm really looking at it like I stepped in dog shit.
Yeah,
It's
it
a
is.
bad card.
It is not good. So spicy cards. Leave them down in the comments. It'll be great. Also, real quick, we never asked what did we learn last week?
Oh, for the sake of brevity, we skipped it, but since we're going to the end of the podcast, for those that are still with us, thanks for hanging out. Thanks, Evan. And let's go ahead and cover that real quick if you guys want, and then we'll just go ahead and start wrapping up. So we're going to end it here if you want to go, but if you want to hang out and see what we learned since last week, why don't you start us off, Ning?
I learned
That he needs to play more.
absolutely nothing. I just learned more about combat chain or draconic chains and how much I hate having to count them. That's really what I've learned.
How high did you have to count?
Hey, sometimes I would play non-draconic cards and I'd have to be like 1-2 skip with and then
1-2 skip a few.
yeah 9-9
9, 10, 11.
or like I'll play 1-2 and then I want to do the thing or I want to get my daggers back and I'm like, oh no, I'm 1-2 short. So it's counting is hard. Okay, as an accountant, I don't really count that often. So
And Trevor, what did you learn since last week?
I was kind of glad we dodged this because I don't think I've played since it's been over a week since I've played. I think I missed the armories, but I don't know. I'm probably gonna learn that I need to practice more because I have not played Dio since OTK Florian's been back really. So I think I'm gonna learn a hard lesson Saturday.
Yeah, I know I actually took off a little bit from work the day before the Pro Quest to get a little bit more practice in. Well, it's really to take my mom to a medical appointment, but I figured I don't want to drive an hour and a half to work and an hour and a half back and just be at work for 2 hours. Makes no sense, right? So, Evan, I'll let you go last since you're kind of new to this. Since I played last time and last week, what I learned was news headpiece is the biggest piece of garbage.
It's annoying.
out there.
You're just learning this.
It's annoying.
That's
And-
crazy.
Okay, I've played more news in the last week than I played in the entire time news been actually out, right? It's just been nonstop news, right? And
There's like 4 or 5 of them in Tuesday now, right?
what a pain in the ass. Like, okay. And so, and the thing is, our local players, Travis, really strong new player.
Yeah.
Everyone's trying to tell me what the helmet does. And in my head, I'm still hearing it, oh, intimidate. Oh,
It's
intimidate.
intimidating. You don't get to
Banish
take
card, intimidate. And everyone's saying, no, Will, it's banish a card. It's not intimidate. I was like, no, it's intimidate. And so I proceeded to playing Fang, banish, let's end. Because I thought it's a great arsenal card.
Oh.
Oh my god.
I lost that game. 1 life. I had to kill new. And guess what? I kept the blue the blue mark and then pin it on the bottom of your deck. Relentless Pursuit. Because I figured, oh, I don't want New to use this.
What is she gonna do? Mark you? Whoa!
Everything about that was wrong because I said, oh, banished card equals intimidate. For those new players, intimidate is intimidate, and banished card stays banished. Right? And it's nothing against Travis and nothing against anyone that was standing around. They told me my brain just refused to translate what they were saying. My second match went a little bit better because I understood what the helmet did a little bit more. But I also learned that pitting 12 D-Reacts to have a total of 12 D-Reacts in a Fang deck does not necessarily mean it's good when you get into the end game. And I almost lost that one at 30 life to his 1 health and 5 count your blessings later. And then he got the last one off, went up to 8. And I was still trying to get Jose down. And man, he almost decked me. I had 4 cards left and finally, got the card off. But it was scary because those D-Reacts really messed me up. So I'm restructuring my deck for the Pro Quest that happened yesterday. That will be a couple days from now.
Nice.
Evan, what did you learn since last week?
Oh man, I've been going on a soul searching, a journey with local player Andrew Lorenz, where basically I play Azalea. I say, hey, look at this spicy new card. And he says, Evan, that card is bad. And I say, no, you're wrong. And then an hour later I say, oh no, Andrew, you were correct. Essentially, a lot of Azalea lists have taken out aim counters. And I said, oh, but aim counters are so good. So I keep trying to make aim counters work. But eventually he convinced me to take them out. This is part of the journey. Mm-hmm. But it just didn't feel right. So I eventually came up with a compromise where I ran a lot of what the sort of more standard Azalea lists are running. But I did get to keep my little aim counter package there. So everybody's happy. I'm happy. Andrew's not happy. He still thinks the cards are bad. But yeah, so I learned aim counters are, it's kind of the metaphor, I guess, would be, Trevor likes Trot Along, Ning likes Corsham, Will, you like Scabskins. I like aim counters. Don't take them away from me.
They already took Corsham away from me.
You can still play Corsham and
just
Florian.
like Corsham and Florian. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Corsham is a reveal card, right? And you get the benefits.
Yeah. Technically, I could play it in Acilio.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Interesting. And you have the Aurora cards.
Here,
But-
real quick, and this is for, of course, all the lovely viewers who have stayed this long. I'm gonna give Ning a special little surprise combo. All right,
Oh, snap.
you could run Jarl with Corsham,
You can. Yes.
and then you could run
Okay,
Blessing
baby.
of. Do you know what Blessing of Deliverance does?
No.
So Blessing of Deliverance makes you reveal the top 3 cards of your library, and then you gain a life for every expensive card.
That's so funny. At the beginning, that's pretty good.
So this is just a little teaser for next week's episode, where
Nice.
Ning tells us how Blessing of Deliverance with Corsham works.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
That's great tech. And that's why we brought Evan on.
That's right. That's right.
He's dropping these knowledge tidbits. All right, guys. Well, thanks for staying with us a little bit longer than our past episodes, but it's only by a few minutes, so hopefully everyone learned a little bit something. And so if that's it, just remember, goldfish your hands, see how it draws, look at your cost curve, look at, how clunky it is, just work your magic, keep on goldfishing. Every card should serve a role. If you don't know what that role is, cut it out. And remember, every turn is a decision, every decision is a story, and don't forget your damn Tunic Counter. Peace.
See ya.